The church is supposed to be a hospital where people are getting better. Sick people get well. You go into the hospital, you want to come out better than when you went in. And the church is supposed to be the same way. I mean, the call for the church is to call the lost, the broken, the downtrodden. That's who's dating. I mean, the people who are dating right now are coming into a relationship broken, but unlike in the church, they don't have the benefit of having the Holy Spirit and having Jesus in order to help guide them, direct them, and lead them into truth and into righteousness. But I think the biggest disconnect is those people are coming into the church now looking for a relationship outcome, and they're not doing the work or committing themselves to the teachings.
So you think that they're still viewing dating within the church like how they would date out in the world? There hasn't been any changes in their personal life.
No, and I talk about that in my book series. I say all the time that you're dating in a modern world. There's no way that you're going to be able to make it a traditional world anymore because things have gone so far down the path that you got to stay in it. So no, no one is changing to or adapting to conform to the teachings of the church and the expectations within the church.
So what do you think then needs to happen on an individual level to get better outcomes for dating?
I tell people all the time to do the work. So if you're a Christian or not, and you've had 5 years of bad dating outcomes, it's a you problem. So let's take the next 6 months. Let's get off the dating apps. Let's get off social media. Let's get off of Netflix. Let's read 6 books, and we can provide you a list of 6 great books. Get involved with a local community group, a church, a mosque, a a local like a YMCA, which was what we have in the States, or a community organization or an alumni association, so you can begin to connect with like-minded individuals, and then just start working on yourself. Because the reason you've had 5 years of bad dating outcomes is because you are the constant, you are the problem. There's something about you or something that you're putting out as an expectation or how you're meeting needs that's turning off the market. And it ain't your body for the ladies. It ain't your hair. It ain't your eyelashes. It ain't your makeup. It ain't your dresses. It ain't your car. It ain't your education. It ain't in your career. None of that stuff matters. Fellas, if you try to lead with your wallet, you're going to get wallet outcomes. And those wallet outcomes means you're going to get gold diggers who only want you for resources. So make sure that you're building the character that we talk about in the book series of getting as close to high value as possible, getting close to the character, the community, getting the cash, and then getting the creativity and the creation out of legacy as a result.
I used to date, and I may have shared this with you. I used to date a girl years ago
Mm-hmm.
who she thought she had it all, right? Like she had everything, all the knowledge, all the wisdom, but yeah, she couldn't maintain relationship after relationship. But then when I got involved in her with her, went on a couple of dates. I was like, something is off. So when I started to ask certain questions, I was like, okay, I know why she is unable to have relationships because she went into it thinking I'm perfect. The problem is everybody else. And then I would ask her, I was like, okay, but people are leaving you. Who leaves perfection? Right? Like people would gravitate towards it. And you mentioned something where you said that women is not their body and men it's not your wallet. Why do you then think so many people lead with things that they probably have overestimated themselves, such as their body or such as their wallet?
It's funny you're talking about that because as of this recording, we're in the we're Palm Sunday going into Easter season. So every church in North America right now is teaching about going to fish. Go fish because ultimately, if you've never met a real Christian, ladies and gentlemen, a real Christian is supposed to give you a life that exemplifies the love that God had through his son, Jesus Christ. I should be inviting people to church. I should be inviting people to understand and have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. That's what every church is trying to get, because it's not just about getting people in the building for 3 services, 6 services, 10 services over 3 days. It's about getting them connected to the Christ. But one thing that we're being taught is to not overestimate or overvalue yourself like some people do. If you overestimate or overvalue yourself, you don't make room for people, you don't make room for God, and you really don't make room for yourself. So when you have a higher value on yourself than you ought to, you start to look down on everyone else and you have a condescending tone. Take that back to dating. This is how men and women are showing up in the dating market, in church and in out. They're showing up, telling the world, I'm more valuable than what you believe or what you say that I am. I am worth this. I am worth having a car, a house, my bills paid for. I am worth 3 trips a year. I am worth having kids and having them in a private school. I am worth you taking care of my mama. When if you can't do that stuff yourself, or you're not identifying and meeting the needs of the person who has the resources to do it, what makes you think you're qualified for that?
And that is the question that a lot of people, I think, don't want to ask themselves is what makes you worthy of this person providing you with this type of lifestyle that you're looking to extract from them? I remember I saw an interview where this woman, she said that men out there, if you earn less than $50,000 a year, you shouldn't be dating. And I found it to be shocking. And then I sat back and I thought about it. I was like, okay, that's around the average income in Canada and the States, or
In
a
the
little bit
States, yep.
higher.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. And then I was like, you know what? Depending on the type of person you're looking for, she may have a point because you don't want to be in a situation where you're living paycheck to paycheck and you're struggling and you want to go on all these dates because maybe one side would be that you necessarily can't afford these dates, or another side would be that, okay, maybe I should date regardless of my income level. What are your thoughts?
I actually agree with her. If anyone's come to me through this content or been to my channel, I always say that relationship outcomes are above or below the line. The line is manhood and womanhood. So the men who we say qualify for great relationship outcome are modern, traditional, high value. Less than 10% is high value of any man in any room. One man out of 10 in every room would qualify as high value. Traditional is harder to get because tradition speaks to this. She really wants a traditional man because traditional men make more than $50,000 a year. They can carry a household of 4 to 6, and they typically have a blue collar background, a high end, high skilled trade, or they own a business where they are the solopreneur or they're in a partnership. And so they expect their woman to take care of them, the kids, the home, and everything else in that order. And he will make sure that he does. He provides, he protects, he professes, he priests in the home. He's wise, he's industrious, he's fearless, he's elegant, and he gets a wife who is ring. She is reliable. Well, I'll just stop there because if I keep going, everyone's going to fall out on their chair. Reliable, because because that's the first key. So I honestly agree and believe that $50,000, if that's the median income in the States, you need to be above that line because you can't afford to go on dates anyway. That's the first thing. Second, now, here's the thing, you may disqualify a lot of good men who have the character you need to be a great husband, a great father, because they're making 48, but they're going to be on their way, because if they're making 48 and they're in their late 20s, by the time they're 41 they're going to be at 148, 248, and that's the type of man you want. But you need to catch that type of man at 48 $100,000 a year before he gets to the 248 in order to benefit from it. Now you got me going. There's this big misconception when you go above the line to men and women that every man started as high value, every man started as traditional, every man started as modern. That's not the case. It's a progression. Our archetypes are that we speak of in our books are a progression. And the best outcome that I can communicate to people who want one man, one woman, long term relationship, marriage, children, legacy as a result, start as early as possible with one person because that gives you a lifetime to build. But we're not doing that. We don't want to build with anyone anymore. In the church, out of the church, we want people coming ready made, like this a meal prep at the CrossFit gym, ready made. I warm it up and then I ingest it or I experience it, and then I go on about my day. But no one can sustain themselves on meal prep through at the gym all their life. You're eventually going to have to learn to go to the grocery store. You're going to eventually learn how to cook. You're going to eventually learn how to manage the budget. You're going to eventually learn how to prepare the meal, serve the meal, and then you're going to have to start serving a meal to larger groups. We never want to get there. My parents celebrated. My father just passed this as of this recording this past year. They were together 54 years. Now, I don't get credit for their 54 years. I've experienced 44 of those years, basically. But at the same time, that's their journey. My mother benefited from the work she invested early in my father as he went to college and he matriculated through General Motors and Delco Remy and became an executive. My father benefited by having a child. He wanted a son, he had me, and he provided a lifestyle for us that allowed my mother to pick and choose her career path. They would have never been able to do that had my mother said, I need somebody that's already making 50, or my father said, I need somebody that's already with zero body count, or somebody that is ready to submit to me. It don't work that way.
What do you think are then some of the obstacles that prevent people from identifying earlier on the potential in the person and that they have the ability to reach it to become the successful man as you described, the successful woman as you stated?
Well, what's lacking is guidance. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people who are out here who are lost and lost. But take it back to the church. The church is supposed to be teaching people who are lost how to get direction and how to find the way. So if you don't have the church, if you don't have your parents, if you don't have an uncle, auntie, or a grandmother, you literally have TV, movies, and social media teaching you how to get the outcome that you want professionally, spiritually, and in relationship or financially. So I think the thing that hinders people is the lack of option and the lack of guidance that they haven't received. That's why it's incumbent upon people and content creators that I follow, such as yourself, myself. We try to highlight other content creators that have positive messaging that come from good families. And we're not just holding it for ourselves. We're trying to teach the lessons to a new generation and even our own generation on how to get the best outcome. But by not having the mentorship, not having the investment of someone who's done it, it's impossible for most people to get the successful outcome, which is why, and I talk about in part two of the book, I tell men specifically, and I only speak to the men, to find a mentor. If you're 32 years old and you want to be a top executive at your company, find the guy who's 45 and who's been with the company for 22 years. Get to take him to coffee, take him, take him to lunch, take her to lunch, and then get to know them and learn their journey about how they were able to matriculate through the organization because you aspire to do that one day. It's the same thing with dating. Find someone at your church, find someone in your community group, find someone in your fraternity or sorority, and or find someone in your extended family and spend time with them and get to know their thoughts about the thing that you're struggling with, in this case, relationship.
From a perspective that I have when I speak to some of my male friends, and you and I have talked about this,
Mhm.
is a lot of times their ego prevents them from asking people that type of information. So, for example, when I was in my 20s and I was struggling with dating and relationships, I know who to go to and the type of advice that I was seeking. As I became older and I see some other people hesitant or straight out refusing to go to those who are in healthy, successful marriages or relationship and asking them, to your point, for guidance or going to the mentors, they rather go to the strangers online who's going to be flashy about it, who's going to say that no, you need to go to the gym, which is true, right? You want to be fit, you want to be healthy. But what I
Nah,
see with a disconnect is that if you have someone that's next door to you that's been with their partner for 20, 30, 40 years, it's right there. The wisdom is right there, but you rather ignore that and then go online. And I see a lot of men fall into the trap of becoming, as they would say, like incels or toxic masculinity and things like that, because then they have a skewed perception of relationships because they think that, well, I'm told that she has to submit to me, but you're leaving out the other part. She has to submit when you've achieved certain status in your life, right? They're earning 20,000. They want the woman to do everything for them like they're high value. Why do you think men are struggling to understand that they need to put in work as well to make sure that the woman respects them as such?
well, women don't submit to men, wives submit to husbands, and they only submit as unto the Lord. This is the misconception about marriage. So if no one ever had a marriage and they weren't taught that, a Christian marriage has an order. The order is God, it's the man, it's the woman, it's the children. Why is that? Because God tells us in the book of Genesis that there is order because he created the world 6 days, rested on the seventh. He never contradicts himself. He's not a God of chaos. When you have that order, what ends up happening from a perfect standpoint, and I'll get to your point, if the kids are acting up, dad says something to mom. If the kids are acting up and doing things that are outside of the scope of day to day, God is using those kids to test mom. People don't like this teaching. And then if dad is acting up and he's not in right authority and alignment with God in a Christian marriage, he get it, it's it